I think I want to start with Pasuk Yud, which I think we saw last week, but I think it's a good place to pick it up. And the plan is going to be to finish up this parak. So again, we're in the second parak, the second chapter. If you're in one of the blue Art Scroll Chumashim, we're on 1279. And if you're in anything else, then it's Kohelet chapter 2, verse 10. Okay, I think we should get started. Good. Okay, so I think we should get started just to try to review a little bit of the beginning of the chapter. Right. At the beginning of the chapter, Shlomo talks a lot about acquiring wealth, acquiring property, sort of following after the more material parts of life. And he got very rich, and he remained very wise, and he was rich and wise at the same time. But he realized that, again, it's all fleeting. Right. I think Ethan last week wanted to make a distinction between Kohelet and Yisron, which I think we can loosely make that distinction. I think it's good. Right. In verse Yud, well, okay, so let's start reading because actually what I'm talking about is in verse Yud. So verse Yud, verse 10, V'chol asher sho'alu einai lo otzalti mehem, right? Anything that my eyes desired, I didn't withhold it from them. Which, by the way, sounds like it reminds me anyway of Kriyas Shema, right? We say v'lo yisosur acharei lebavchem v'acharei einechem asher etzosias. Yeah, well, to not stray after the desires of your heart and the sight of your eyes. So this, in some ways, feels like it's working against that. Just noting that, I'm not sure that there's anything to do with it. Lo manatias libi mikol simcha, right? I didn't withhold my heart from any joy. Ki libi someach mikol amali, and my heart was glad with, again, I've seen translations. Art Scroll translates this as with all of my endeavors, all of my work, which I like that better. JPS translates it as all of my possessions, which might make sense in context. But again, we saw here there's maybe a bit of a work ethic in here. Maybe there might be hints of my heart being gladdened by the work that I did. I think that is a principle that we believe in, even though here he's still going to be kind of dismissive of it. But he says that v'zeh haya chelki mikol amali, right? That this happiness that he achieved through this work and what he was looking at and what he was doing, that happiness is his portion. And I think Ethan wanted to say in this world, and that's what I'd like to say also, right? That there is benefit. He's benefiting in this world, right? He's not out on the streets. He's certainly, his life is enriched on a certain level from all that he's amassed. So in that sense, chelki, that's his chelik. Ufonisi ani b'chol ma'asai she'osu yodai uve'amal she'amalti la'asos. But I looked at all of my actions and at everything that I worked for. V'hine hakol hevel uru'us ruach. And nevertheless, it was all fleeting. It was all vanity, uru'us ruach, and an embitterment of spirit, vexation of spirit. Ve'ein yisron tachas hashemesh, and there's no real benefit under the sun. And here, yisron here is what we're maybe suggesting is referring more to a lasting legacy, or an afterlife even, right? He can't take any of these riches with him to the next world. Any thoughts or questions until this point?
Well, this is just in general what I've been thinking about this week. I don't know if you listened to him. Judy turned me on to him. His name is Rabbi David Sachs. He's in California,
Okay.
and actually, he's an Emmy. He's a rabbi. He is a Kalabachnik, and he's an Emmy award-winning writer.
Okay.
So he wrote for The Simpsons. He won his Emmy for The Simpsons. So I
Interesting.
have no doubt, though he never actually said it. I don't know if you remember because I'm much older than you. but Krusty the Clown is Jewish. Like
Sure,
that's
yeah, yeah.
classic
Krusty Christopherson
right. That's gotta be him.
or Christovsky, whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's gotta be that. But
Okay,
my point is, he's the guy who is living the life I want.
okay,
He's got a critical acclaim. He's wealthy, and the critical acclaim. I would say that's what I would list as number one
okay,
of all those things
okay,
myself. Anyway, so he did an interview in this podcast called Living L'Chaim.
okay.
It was actually taped about a month ago, so this was before the fires.
Mhm.
And but even then, like the guy asked him, and he's the guy who the interview is just like this Flatbush FFB guy, and says to him, "How could you do tshuva in Hollywood?" Because even this guy who grew up from like I think when I said this to some other people, like he's living the dream, not just my dream, everybody's dream. Everybody wants to get that acclaim for to do the
Okay,
creative thing that they want to do.
okay.
It's one thing to be a guy on Wall Street, but to be a success in Hollywood, that's like so much better.
Being able to make a living off of your passion and your creativity. I hear you. Yeah,
And he said, like, if you go into an ordinary apartment or you go into like a Steven Spielberg's mansion, it's just a bigger place.
okay.
It's not that different. And maybe because we're reading this, that's sort of it seems to me what he said, what Rich Shlomo HaMelech is saying also. Like I've had it all. I've had the wealth.
Okay,
You think it's all that? It's not all that.
okay,
And I don't think I would have believed it from anybody else
okay.
because when you
Yeah.
don't have it, you always think that the lack in my life is that it's
Did-
not my connection with God.
Okay. Deep.
Well, that's what he said. Like there's a God-sized hole in people's lives,
Hmm.
and maybe only when you've seen it all and you've experienced it all can you really know that everything else is false.
I hear you. Yeah, yeah, I think you might be right. I think maybe Shlomo is hoping that he could do the work for us, perhaps, but we'll see. But I think that's great. I really appreciate that. Good. Okay, so let's keep going a little bit. Um, and I think that might become relevant in the continuation of the chapter here. So we're Pasuk Yud Beis, 12th verse. Uvonisiani liros chachma v'holelus v'sichlus. Right, I turned to examine wisdom and folly and madness. Ki meha adam sheyavo achrei hamelech eis asher kvar asuhu. Right, this again, last week we said the Hebrew here is very difficult to make heads or tails of. Let's see how Art Scroll does it. For what can man who comes after the king do? It has already been done. Which I think is a good literal translation of the Hebrew here. It's just, I don't fully know what it means, but maybe it's what you were saying, Kressel. That like, the king's already built this huge house, and all it is a big house. It's really it's just a bigger version of what everyone else has. So here's this is very interesting, right? Now he is going to say that he saw that there is some benefit to wisdom, actually. I saw that there are benefits to wisdom over folly or madness. Right? In the same way that there's an advantage to having light over dark. And he's going to extend this metaphor. Hechacham einov birosho, right? That a wise person's eyes are in their head. V'haksil b'choshech holech. Fool walks in darkness. 1 second, sorry.
Hey, Mordecai.
Okay, welcome,
Hi.
Mordechai.
Hey, Mordecai.
We're holding in Pasuk Yud Daled, which is actually, I think, it's a famous line, right? Echacham einav berosho, v'aksil b'choshech holech, right? A wise person has their eyes in their head, and a fool or a not so wise person walks around in darkness. V'yodati gam ani shemikra echad yikra es kulam. But here he's going to qualify it again, right? He's going to take a darker turn. But nevertheless, they meet the same end, right? We all meet the same end. We all meet the same end. Okay. Ve'amarti ani belibi, and I said to myself, I said in my heart, I said in my mind, Kimikre haksil gam ani ikreni, right? I'm going to have the same end as the fool. Same thing's going to happen to me. Ve'lama chachamti ani az yoiser. So why did I become so wise? V'dibarti belibi, and I said to myself, shigam zeh havel, that this is also vanity or futility. Ki ein zichron l'chacham im haksil l'olam, b'shekvar hayamim haboim hakol nishkach ve'echiyamus l'chacham im haksil. So this is interesting, right? Again, Art Scroll's translating this. Who's using Art Scroll? Is anyone on
I'm using what you sent in the email.
Okay, Beseder. So I'm actually not
What is-
sure where that's
What
from.
is that?
Not sure, actually. Andrea sent that out. It's here. I can.
Mechon Mamre.
Okay, fine. Yeah, Mechon Mamre. They have. I think that's their own translation. I think they do their own
Okay.
translations. Okay, so Art Scroll actually translates this as a question over here, right? So starting in verse 15. So I said to myself, the fate of the fool will befall me also. To what advantage then have I become wise? But I concluded that this too is futility. Now, verse 16, for there is no comparison between the remembrance of the wise man and of the fool at all. For as the succeeding days roll by, is all forgotten. How can the wise man die like the fool? Right? Art Scroll does draw a distinction between the wise and the foolish in their death. That the memory of a wise person actually people remember the wise more than they remember the foolish, maybe. I think that's in keeping with Rashi. I think that's where Art Scroll gets it from. But I saw a number of other translations that don't translate it that way. They take it for granted that no, everyone does meet the same end, right? What's bothering Shlomo over here? It's not that there is no difference between the memory of the wise and the foolish. At the end of the day, everyone's going to die and everyone's going to be forgotten.
It's interesting that you're saying be forgotten, because I thought I mean, maybe, I'm sitting here with my mom with Alzheimer's. So what I thought it meant was that in old age, everybody loses their wisdom.
Interesting. That's interesting.
I'll tell something else, but I don't know, this is so on shot, but when she was in assisted living, the two people who were there who didn't seem to be affected were both school teachers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Didn't seem to be affected by what?
Alzheimer's.
Uh-huh. But they were in assisted living anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, for other reasons, I think.
Yeah.
My understanding is that once you hit 80, it's about a 50-50 chance. My mom's a geriatric social worker, and
Right.
her focus is Alzheimer's. So once a person hits 80, it's about a 50-50 chance. And things that are mentally stimulating, so maybe like teaching, or like someone who does the crossword every day, it might help. It might help.
Yeah. Well, Yafa Eliach, you know who she was?
I don't think so.
She wrote, well, among her books are Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. She was the curator of.
Oh, I have heard of that book. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then she wrote a really encyclopedic book on shtetl history. She was a historian.
Mhm.
I had her in Brooklyn College. She used to say she read a book every day. She ended up with Alzheimer's. Like, of
Yeah.
all people, to one of the most intellectual people I've ever met in my life.
For sure.
So it didn't
Right.
preserve it with her.
Yeah, my grandfather also, they also, Rav Soloveitchik, right? Rav Soloveitchik,
Really?
he got dementia by the end, and that's someone who was for sure doing mentally stimulating stuff all the time. So it can help, but it's certainly no guarantee.
Do you know how old he was when he became demented?
Rav Soloveitchik,
Yeah.
not sure. I can
Mm,
find out. I just don't know offhand.
yeah.
I think he passed away in the late 80s.
Oh, did he in the 80s? Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how long he had it for.
It was a while. It was long enough that he like slowly, I think he stopped giving as many shiurim. Like, I don't think it was like an abrupt thing. I think it was like over the years he started cutting back on how many shiurim he was giving and until he couldn't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that was someone famously with a very sharp, very active mind. So, but okay. But it's interesting. I'm not sure that that's shot here, Kressel, but it's definitely something to think about. And I think it fits within the general concern that Shlomo has. Um, okay, good. So now let's go to Pasuk Yud Zion. All right, 17. And this is interesting. I think this is very human here. I think this is very understandable, and it makes sense from everything that we've just read from him so far. V'sonesi es hachayim ki ra olai ha'maaseh shena'aso tachas hashemesh. Right? He says, I hated life. I really just despised life. Because everything that's done under the heavens to me seemed evil or distressing. Hiakol hevel uruus chaim, because everything is vanity or everything is fleeting and a vexation of spirit. Visonesi ani es kol amali she'ani omel tachas hashamesh, right? And I hated everything that I did, right? All of my endeavors or all of my property, depending on how you want to translate it, under the sun. She'ani chenu le'odam sheyeh acharoi, right? So here's a new knech, here's a new little piece of what's bothering him. Again, it's part of the whole you can't take it with you thing, but I hated everything that I did because I knew I was going to pass on everything to someone else after me. Right? And who knows if that person who's going to take over for me is going to be a wise person or a fool. Bishlat b'chol amali she'amalti v'shechochamti tachas hashamesh gam ze havel. Thus I hated my sorry. And who knows whether he'll be wise or foolish, and he will have control of all my possessions, for which I toiled and have shown myself wise beneath the sun. Right. So again, he can't take them with him. And what's more is who even knows how it's going to be used, right? I guess that's how I'm sort of understanding this is I amassed all of these things and they're interesting and nice to have, but they're also useful, right? All of these vineyards and all of these, I don't know, fields. And who knows what the next person is going to do with them? Maybe they're going to mess up everything. Maybe they'll use it nice, but maybe not. Who knows?
Who
Yeah.
was the next person?
Well, interestingly enough, it was after Shlomo that the kingdom split up.
It did.
Yeah.
I see.
Which I imagine the commentaries think that I think there's approaches that he's alluding to that here to some
That
degree.
what?
He might be alluding to that here on a
I
drop,
see.
but
Ruach HaKodesh.
could be. Because again, it did get bad after he passed away. But I guess two things jump out at me here is just how destructive this hate is, right? Everything that he's worked so hard for and everything that he's found happiness in, the fact that it's fleeting and a vexation makes him hate that very stuff. So that's interesting to me. And again, just this added piece now of who knows what the next generation is going to do with it. Just because we're getting on in time, I'd like to maybe finish up the chapter and then we can share our reactions after that. Lisabosiani liyoesh es libi. Right? How do they translate that? So I turned my heart to despair. Okay. Right? I turned my heart to despair. Al kol ha'amal she'amalti, over everything that I worked for, tachas hashamesh. Ki yesh adam she'amale b'chochma uvedas uvekishron, right? Because there's people in this world who work with wisdom and with knowledge and with a good understanding. Adam shelo omal bo yitnenu chelko, but he's going to have to give all of that to someone who never worked for it to begin with. Gam hevel, that's also vain v'ra rabba, and it's real bad. it's a big evil. Ki me hove le'adam b'chol amalo uv'rayon libo shu omel tachas hashemesh. Because in the end, what is it that a person has from all of their toil and all of their ideas? Ki chol yamav machayvim, all of their days are pain, v'chas, and anger, in yanoi, v'chas in yanoi, right? Yeah, okay. Art Scroll says his business is a vexation, but the days are filled with pain and anger and sorrow. Gam baloila lo shachav libo, and at night you don't get people don't get any rest, right? If anything, that's when the racing thoughts get worse.
Gosh.
Gam
Yeah.
hevelhu, and he says this is also fleeting or vanity. Actually, so yeah, let's talk here. This is a good pausing point for a minute because he's gonna do an interesting change of face also. Any thoughts or reactions to this bit so far? Sorry, I'm half open. That's fine. And if not, that's fine too.
Yeah, it might hit me later.
No problem. Okay, so here's another one where different translations have different approaches, and I'm not crazy about art scrolls in this. I think it's just less interesting. Okay, here's Mordechai again. But okay, so we're in Chaf Dalid. Ein tov ba'adam sheyochal v'shasa v'hera es nafsho tov ba'amoloi. He says, the only good for a person is that they should eat and drink, and that they should behold and that they should have satisfaction in their labor. Art Scroll poses that as a question. I think it's more interesting as a statement. Ein tov be'adam, right? The only good thing for a person, sheyachol v'shasa, that he should eat and drink v'hera es nafsho tov ba'amaloi, and should recognize the good and get fulfillment from his labor. Gam zora isiani kimiado Elohim he. And even that I perceived as coming from the hand of God. So what's interesting to me and why I don't want to translate this as a question is that, again, maybe we do see here something that is worthwhile. It's not eternal. It's not this eternal memory and that Shlomo is after, but a part of life is eating and drinking and getting satisfaction from labor. I think, again, that is something that we all agree are good things. It could be he's coming to chip away at that a little bit, but also maybe he is admitting that eating, we're allowed to eat and drink. We're supposed to eat and drink. We're allowed to enjoy our labor. We're supposed to enjoy our labor if we can. It's not a bad thing. And he says, at least the way it's translated here, but even that is from Hashem, which makes it sound like that's not up to us, which I think is theologically, I think, true. But what's interesting to me here is that he's calling this from Hashem, meaning eating and drinking and taking pride in your work comes from Hashem. I think that adds to the goodness that is there. Again, is this goodness eternal? I guess not, but it is within our fleeting and temporary lives. This is where some of that fulfillment and some of that goodness comes from, I think. And also, for sure, worth noting that Chazal say that eating and drinking here is referring to Torah and Masim Tovim. So for sure, again, that's eternal. But on a pshat level, I think it's deep. I think we're not an ascetic religion. We're a religion that recognizes the importance of benefiting from this world that God has given us and put us into. And so on a pshat level, I think that's very deep. And on a drush level, Torah and Masim Tovim, that's good stuff. Ki mi yochal umi yochush chutz mimeni, right? I guess, for who should eat and who should make haste except me. Maybe he's saying because he's the king, and so more than anyone else, he's got food aplenty, he's got drink aplenty, and he's got tasks to do aplenty. So maybe that's what he's saying there. Kila adam shetov lefanov nosan chochma vidas v'simcha. This I think we have to be very careful with. But says Shlomo, Kila Adam Shitov Lefanav, because to a person who is good in front of him, meaning Hashem, right? A person who's good in front of Hashem, Hashem gives this person wisdom and knowledge and happiness. Vilachote nosan inyan leesof velichnos lases letov lifneho Elohim, which I think is very interesting. But again, we have to be careful with this. So in the English here, basically a person who's good in God's eyes, God will give them wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. And to a sinner, God gives inyan leesof velichnos. God gives this desire to gather and amass, loses letov lifnei Elohim, in order to then give all of that stuff to someone who is good in the eyes of God. Ganze hevel urus ruach, right? This is also fleeting or vanity and a vexation of the spirit. The one thing I want to say before I open it up, what's so interesting to me about this pasuk is that the desire that's given to the sinner over here is the desire to amass, right? And again, I think we've touched on this a little bit before. There's a difference between, say, Einstein, who couldn't help himself, but he read everything voraciously and had to pursue the knowledge because that was just his nature. That's different than the I don't know, than the grad student who's deciding that I have to be the next Einstein, I have to amass all of the knowledge, right? It's a different dynamic. Not to rag on grad students, they have it hard enough as it is, but here part of the desire seems to be, maybe we can say that the desire to amass things itself is one of the things that God puts into the heart of those that God's not so happy with. On a more pshat level, it's just saying that the person that God's not happy with amasses the wealth also, but it's ultimately just so that it's given over to, I don't know, their heir who's a better person, or to their neighbor who's a better person. The reason why I say we have to be careful with this verse is because I think it's tempting, and I think we have to stay away from this temptation to take a look at our own lot in life and decide, oh, I've got things good, so God must love me, or, oh, I've got things bad, so God must hate me, right? I think we have to stay far away from that. But I think one could read this pasuk that way. Okay, thoughts, reactions, questions?
Well, I don't know, but for what it's worth, when my son off the derech and the other mothers I've spoken to in that situation, amongst that kind of kid, food is a really big thing, and I don't know. That's the first job a lot of them get, and they actually think it's glamorous.
Yeah.
Is working in the food industry. Maybe that's just because that's the job you can get when you don't have too many other skills. But I always wondered if it was because of just the concreteness.
Okay. That's interesting.
If you're rejecting the existence of God that you were raised with, but food is undeniable. It's right there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's grounding, it's concrete, it's real. It's real beyond any reproach. Interesting. That's very interesting.
I'm struck a little bit by
Yeah.
the idea that God is mentioned here in chapter 2,
Good,
where
good.
it wasn't mentioned in chapter 1.
Okay.
And that sort of I don't know, maybe puts things in perspective a little bit, or
Yeah.
it brings on who we need to trust. So anyway, I'm not sure.
Agreed. 100% agreed. That's what's most striking to me, I think, about this chapter. And I think it's like what you were saying before, Kressel, that here's Shlomo HaMelech, he's tried everything, he's amassed everything, all the wisdom, all the folly, all the wealth, all the everything. And after that, his thoughts are now turning to God. His thoughts are now turning to the God-sized hole that nothing else was able to fill. I think we could maybe say that. I think at least here's the beginnings of it. And why, and again, it's Shlomo engaging with the concept of God before the debatably throwaway line at the end of everything, that at the end of the day, trust in Hashem, right? I think it gives it even more weight that no, he is talking about God in this, and sort of painting God as the source and as the eternal peace. And again, I don't know if this is shot, but the idea that this little thing that Shlomo admits to, that eating and drinking and taking pride in work, that there's goodness there, that's good for a person, he attributes that to God. So that's something coming from God is one of the things that he is calling at least beneficial, even if it's not the eternality that he's looking for. So I think that's spot on. I think barring any more questions, we'll hold here. That's the end of the parak. We'll pick it up next week, Mirz Hashem, back to our normal time. And speaking of time, that's to everything. There's a season, a time to this, time to that.
13
so that's
and
a
3.
good chapter. Yeah, that's going to be chapter 3. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
folks.
Thank you.
All
Have a
right.
good week. Have a good Shabbos.
Have a good week. Have a good Shabbos.
Are you going away?
Yeah, I'm going to be away this Shabbos.
Ah,
But Mirz Hashem, I'll be back next week. So
okay.
So we need somebody to do the Devar Torah.
yeah,
said
I know
would do
Ethan's
it,
been
but I'm
asking
really,
him.
I said I would do it, but I'm really not excited about it.
Okay.
Well, we'll be
Good
excited when
parsha.
we hear you.
Yeah, yeah.
That just adds the pressure.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Hatzlacha.
Bye.
And,
Good
we'll see you soon.
Shabbos.
Be well.
Okay, bye.
Shabbos.